So the movie starts with the hostage negotiation at a cabin, uh, and they show the cabin, and the police are all outside. You see the police lights, and they're like, "Oh my God, this man, he's got his family in there or something, and this is a really dangerous situation." So then it cuts to uh, a SWAT team going all Rainbow Six style in the building, but it cuts to like the back of the cabin, and like 12 people fall out of the sky in like tactical gear. But then one person is hiding under like a snow blanket or something and just like flips it out. It's like, how long was that guy just hiding in the snow out there? And then it turns out that that guy is The Rock. And then The Rock looks at his friend, uh, a partner, buddy, or whatever before they breach the door. And breaching is when they put the explosives on and explode everything, and then go in and immediately like take care of the people in the room. Uh, well, yeah, I don't think they were very good hostage saving people, and I'll get to that too in a second. So they get inside and they breach it, which I think is a really bad idea in this instance, because like there's a family being hostage, and who knows, he's got his hand possibly on a trigger or something, and then just make this giant explosion, and then they don't immediately like flashbang or do anything like that like you see in other media. Like it takes a second, and then they find the guy who still hasn't murdered his family yet, and he's there, and The Rock's trying to talk him down, and then he turns around and he's holding a kid. He's holding his son, presumably, or maybe his like girlfriend's kid or something. You don't really know the relationship. And that the actor's in some stuff. I can't remember off the top of my head what he's in, but The Rock's like, "Oh no, you got a kid," and then he's like, "Boom!" and he explodes, and that's how The Rock loses his leg. And presumably that whole family got killed too. But they never reference that again. So I have to give the movie credit in that respect, because there's no way that little kid survived. And I think for us to start taking tense situations seriously in movies involving children, Hollywood, you got to start killing kids. Like in movies, you just got to start taking them out. When I was a kid, I saw this one movie where Macaulay Culkin got murdered by bees, and that was terrifying. And that was a coming of age story about a little girl. And Macaulay Culkin was murdered by bees. He was like 10 or something in that movie. And Home Alone was really popular. Everyone's like, "Oh, Kevin McAllister," and he got murdered by bees. And I'm okay. I made it through. You gotta start, like, next Jurassic Park movie, you gotta have a kid eating. They tried to do that in Jurassic Park 2. I think at the very beginning of the movie, they have that one little girl, and she gets attacked by all the compies, and they all jump on her and start, and then they cut away to her father running up, and his father's like, "No!" And then his mom shows up, and his mom just goes, "Ah!" And, like, then they cut away to black, or like start the rest of the movie, and it's like, wow, that kid just got killed. But then they throw a line in later, and they're like, "Oh, that kid's fine. They got a lawsuit." I think originally they wanted to murder kid, and then they decided it was too dark or something for the Jurassic Park movies, so then they, slipped that line in. So that whole hostage situation happens. Cut to 10 years later, The Rock's putting on his prosthetic leg, which they don't really mention much in the movie at all. Like, you see it for action scenes, and most of the action scenes are in the trailer, but The Rock doesn't have any character development or any character in regard to, like, being upset that he's lost a leg or anything. Anytime it comes up, it's basically like, "Well, if I didn't lose my leg, I wouldn't have my wife who helped put me back together, and my kids. It's a positive thing. Yay, no leg. Also, I can use it to open doors." So it's like, why did they give him prosthetic leg just for the scenes? Like, is it an empowerment thing? Because again, like, if it just shows that if you're The Rock, you can do these things if you're missing a leg. but normal people can't do these things. He like holds a bridge up by himself. Yeah. Okay. So he's got a happy home life. He's now a security and safety consultant, and he's working out of his garage, they say, even though you don't really see his home life because he's in this giant tower that's being built, and he's like the one guy he's got to go make a presentation about this tower. But it's like they make it seem like it's an important meeting for him to get the job, even though he's already got the job and the security's already been like raided and stuff. So like maybe I'm misconstruing all of that. It doesn't matter in this movie. So he goes to his meeting. His friend, who was on the hostage team with him, is there. And you know his friend, even if you didn't recognize his face when they showed him briefly in the earlier scene, you know his friend was there because his friend's got this burn on the side of his neck. So they get all set up with the security gig, and then it turns out that his friend was actually setting him up the whole time because he got mixed in with bad people. And they never explain how he got mixed in with bad people. Other than that, his life was ruined after that bomb exploded and took The Rock's leg and he got his side of his face burned. His life was ruined. It's like, I feel like The Rock got the crappier end of the stick. But again, like, he's perfectly okay with his missing leg while his burned neck man has to sell out his friend. So then, like, he basically sets up The Rock, and then The Rock finds out because he then tries to murder The Rock, and then Rock's like, don't murder me. And the first thing the guy does in this pretty decent action scene is basically like, oh, I can't fight The Rock when he has two legs. I got to try and take one of his legs off. So that's his whole thing is, and he still can't combat The Rock because it's The Rock. So this is when The Rock finds out his family's in the building and it's on fire. So he runs to a building. There's like several scenes in this movie where cops pull their guns on The Rock and they're like, stop, you're under arrest. Except they say it in some sort of Asian language, and he just like, and then takes off running or pushes someone. Like, they're really incompetent police. Like, they just let this man with one leg do whatever he wants. So he steals a police motorcycle, drives to the building. More cops are like, hey, stop. And then he just like says no, and then pushes them again. And then he climbs a construction crane that he then runs off the side of to try and get inside this giant flaming building, which is okay. Like, that's pretty cool. But then the cops on the ground are like, oh, why is this man who we think burned the building down trying to get in the building? And then they put together that his family's in the building and that he's trying to save his family. And then that's like their whole purpose. Like, I really don't. They're just like on the ground watching this all happen. They don't do anything. So The Rock gets in the building, and he immediately basically finds his family. Like, immediately. They got separated, though, because of fire stuff was happening in the building, and he's got to... he's able to get his wife and his daughter out of the building. No, his wife and his son out of the building. By sending them down a dangerous elevator shaft. It's like, okay, really glad that worked out for them. But his son is trapped. No, sorry, not his son. They're twins. They're supposed to be twins, so it's okay to mix them up. His daughter is still in the building. But it's funny, though, because like there's a scene where he has to help his wife get his son across this really... The bridge is broken, and The Rock is holding the cables of the bridge with his bracing himself with his prosthetic leg, which I think would probably pop off due to the amount of strain and pressure that The Rock is putting on it. So he's holding this bridge up, and they put a wooden plank down for the kid to walk across. And instead of the kid walking across this really, really thin piece of wood, they send the mom, which didn't make sense to me, because then the mom's across, and then it's like now you're both on the wrong side, and then the kid, then they piggyback the kid across this thing. Like you're putting way too much extra weight on that board, and of course the board falls, but everyone's okay. I feel like the kid should have done that thing where he tries to go across the plank, and they're like, "You have to do it, little Tommy," and he's like, "No, I'm scared," and they're like, "No, you can do it," and then he starts to do it, kind of like the scene in Jurassic Park where little Timmy is climbing down the electric fence and he gets scared, and then even though bad things happen and he falls, he's okay. So he gets half his family out, and his daughter's still like on the other side of this giant flaming building, and he's got to get to her. But the terrorists, bad guy, gangsters find her and are like, "We need the rock because the Chinese billionaire we are burning this building down to get has put himself in a panic room, and he's the only one who can get him out of that panic room because he set up the security and safety, and he knows the regulations." So they get his daughter, and then The Rock immediately finds them and his daughter. It just seems like things happen so fast in this movie without not a lot of other stuff happening. And he's there, and they're like, "We have your daughter, you have to get him out." And he's like, "I can't get him out, there's no way." And they're like, "Well, you'll find a way, or we'll throw your daughter off the building." And then they disappear, and then he's like, "Well, I gotta get this guy out." And then he figures out how to get the guy out by climbing on the side of the building and jumping through dangerous stuff. And then he's like, gets the guy, and the guy's like, he's like, "Why are these guys trying to burn your giant building down?" And the guy tells him, and this is part of the movie that really just does not make any sense. So the Chinese billionaire wanted to make this giant building, and somehow he got involved with like crime syndicates. And these crime syndicates were like, "You have to do what we say," and stuff. And he's like, "No." And then somehow he also developed some sort of technology, or he tricked them and got all their personal information, and he was gonna like release it out to if he dies, all that information gets released out to the world. So now all these terrible gangsters want that information, the original drive back, because if they get the original drive, they can because if something happens to the Asian guy and he dies, it all gets released. But if they get the drive back, they can make it so that doesn't happen. So I'm just curious why the Asian guy has the drive or cares about the drive in the first place. Like he's got it in the safe in this giant building, and that's the first thing he runs to get when the building's on fire and he realizes people are after him. Like, why wouldn't you just destroy it? If you destroy it, then they can't ever fix their problem, and then you're safe and they can never kill you. So that whole MacGuffin thing does not make any sense in this movie. Like, why? So The Rock gets him out, and then they get to the top of the building and are there to talk to this guy. He can save his daughter, and The Rock has a plan that involves surrendering and using duct tape, just like in Die Hard. That was one of the things. Like, this movie did not want to be Die Hard, and it has a different enough plot than Die Hard that it's a little unfair how they marketed it, where everyone just thought it was just Die Hard with The Rock. But then they slide in these little moments that are clear nods are being taken from Die Hard that just like, why would you do that to your movie? Why wouldn't you want it to stand alone on its own? Like, why use duct tape in the final climactic scene? I don't get it. Like, why? If this movie was done a disservice by the advertising it, by making it look like it was closer to Die Hard than it was, and then people didn't want to see it because it looks like Die Hard. It's like, I've seen that before. When this movie is a lot different than that. But then this movie makes these odd choices where it does these nods or references to Die Hard at small ones and odd ones, but also iconic ones. It's like, why hamper yourself with those references? Why wouldn't you want it to stand on its own merits? He might as well say "Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon" before he, reveals that it's all a ruse. So he's at the top of this building, and there's the final scene, and there's actually this really cool, like, mirror setup that was shown earlier in the movie when the rich guy was like showing off his giant building. He's like, "Look, in the top of this building, it's a fun house." It's like, okay, dude, you spent all the millions and billions of dollars to make a giant fun house, 250 stories in the air. So there's mirrors, and the bad guys don't know where the good guys are. The good guys don't know where the bad guys are. And yeah, eventually it ends with this scene where like The Rock, it's just like the beginning when the bad guy turned around and had a kid. Except this time the bad guy turns around, he's holding a grenade while holding the girl over a hole 250 stories above ground. It's like it's a little overkill, man. You don't need that many ways to like, threaten The Rock's child. And The Rock's like, "Oh no." But it turns out that the Rock that he's seeing is actually a reflection of The Rock, and The Rock's actually behind him, and The Rock then, like, Leonidas kicks him or something, and then he falls off the building and explodes. And, like, I'm just trying to imagine, like, logically how that actually happened then, because if the whole time that the bad guy's got the little girl, and The Rock is literally in front of him, like, so The Rock can see that he has his daughter. Then the guy turns around, he's looking at a reflection of The Rock. And then The Rock's still behind him, and The Rock's gonna be like, "Oh, you have my daughter." And, like, has to, like, act like he's, in front of him and not behind him. Instead of just, like, coming behind him, like, snapping his neck or something because he's The Rock. Or I wonder if maybe you could see his prosthetic leg in the mirror and, like, see and be able to tell that it's a reflection before it is a reflection. That'd be a pretty cool detail. So all that's happening, and so they needed something for the cops on the ground to do and Neff Campbell to do. So they're trying to get this tablet that The Rock was given at the beginning of the movie, I guess, or actually they're trying to find the bag, where the bad guys are going to land when they escape, because they're going to parachute from the top of the building, they decide. And so they're fighting other thugs on the ground occasionally, or not even occasionally, just one scene. Then they get this tablet back, and then they're like, "Hey, maybe if we turn the safety and security system on and off again like a computer, it'll fix everything." And it does, because she had problems with her cell phone at the beginning of the movie. See, foreshadowing. They set it up. So they stop the fire, and The Rock saves his daughter. And the bad guy, like, he was just some Scandinavian dude, terrorist, who does, even though he's the leader of all these other bad guys, he's like he does all the grunt work. Like, you see him carrying and lifting stuff. He's setting up the fire. He's the one, like, drilling through this hole to get into the building. Like, I can't remember the face of any of his, like, partners. They're all, and he doesn't have a personality or anything at all. He just, like, makes some comments about being the kings and queens and princesses and that. Well, he says some things. The Rock's MacGyver in the movie. Like, they have recurring jokes with duct tape, and he, like, there's a bunch of scenes where he just grabs a bunch of stuff to complete some task that he's doing. He uses a sword in the movie. That's pretty cool. John McClane never used a sword. Maybe he did use a sword. I can't remember the other Die Hards if there was a sword in it. Oh. The other egregious, like, Die Hard, like, kind of reference that really bothered me is at the very end of the movie, Rock saves his family. Rock's on the ground. Rock is with his family, and the police officer who's been on the ground the whole time comes up to him, and he's like, "It's finally good to meet you." And The Rock's just like, "Huh. I don't even think The Rock said anything, which is the perfect reaction because they have no contact through the whole movie. And the guy just used Carl Winslow's line, where in Die Hard, the whole time they're talking back and forth, they're helping each other through the situation, and then they finally meet. It actually means something. In this movie, The Rock's just like, who the heck are you? I don't know you. Why is it good to meet me? It's yeah. So I think that's about it. Like I said, like the kids survive, they're okay. There is a little tension that maybe they'll like kill off one of his kids because they did already blow up kids earlier in the movie, and like there's like a comment at the game's like, which one do I love more? Blah blah. Blah. I love you both, and it's like, what if he did lose one of them? It would be really really sad. Then the movie's over. Like I said, it was very serviceable. You don't need to see it in theaters.